Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me on Moonlight Legends, where we discuss everything supernatural. I am your host, Damian Knoll. Tonight, I have a story for you about a witch from Wichita. At a young age, Gwyneth Miller had become accustomed to the luxuries of wealth. Her family owned one of the largest farms in the Pennsylvania area, and they had grown extremely proud of this. But as many locals would have described it as arrogance. The Millers even enjoyed boasting about how their family line could be traced back to some of the earliest settlers of America, using it as their explanation on why they were better than the rest. Gwyneth's mother spent her time making sure that their lives were filled with the best money could buy, and her father, John Miller, spent most of his time in gambling houses. When her father wasn't gambling, he spent the rest of his time teaching Gwyneth herbology. She was fascinated by the science and would write down everything he taught her in her diary. But John Miller's gambling eventually caught up to him. He owed money to many people in their small town. One fateful night, the townspeople decided to take matters into their own hands. While all of the Miller family was asleep, the townspeople torched their house and their fields. Gwyneth and her father were the only ones to survive. Together, they fled to rural Kansas. Her father decided he could start up another farm with the help of his daughter. However, in 1905, shortly after they arrived in Wichita, John became ill with cholera. He died soon after. This left Gwyneth alone to fend for herself in a new, unfamiliar town. The neighbor said after her father's passing, she locked herself away from the world. She was so distraught after the loss that she became obsessed with trying to bring him back to life. With what her father had taught her about herbology, Gwyneth believed she could bring him back with science. The citizens spoke out about strange noises and lights coming from her house during the night. They grew more and more fearful of Gwyneth. After months of research and experiments, Gwyneth was finally ready to resurrect her father. However, on that same night, the citizens had band together to storm her home. The records go on to say she was dressed in all black, as if she was heading to a funeral. As she was being dragged out, her blood-curdling screams echoed for what seemed like miles. The citizens set fire to her house, with the corpse of her dead father still inside. She called out for her father, as if he were alive in there. Overcome with fury, she cursed the citizens of Wichita. Despite her curses, the citizens hung her for witchcraft. She swung there for hours, slowly suffocating, all while she tried to call out for her father. They say on moonless nights, you can see a woman dressed in all black, wandering the streets, calling out for her father. Our next story for tonight comes all the way from ancient Egypt, but first, suffering by a living illusion.
Take this moment to think for yourself, not for anyone else. 'Cause life is not worth living when the people around you are pushing and pulling you down. So far from everything I thought I ever knew, that something has to change and things will never be the same. You tear my mind out. Yeah, you tear my mind out. Tell me who doesn't feel the pressures of life, colliding and suffering, but this is no way to live when the ones you depend on are pushing and pulling you down. So far from everything I thought I ever knew, that something has to change and things will never be the same. You tear my mind out. Yeah, you tear my mind out. You tear my mind out. Yeah, you tear my mind out. Try to believe that things will never be the same. You tear my mind out. Yeah, you tear my mind out. You
Welcome back. You were listening to Moonlight Legends, and that last song was Suffering by Living Illusion. Our next story starts in Egypt, around 290 BC. Egypt was on the verge of their downfall, and the Roman Empire would soon take over. The Egyptians knew the Roman armies would not easily be defeated, and they feared for their lives. But around the same time, a certain phrase started to appear everywhere in their ancient texts. Historians noticed this odd occurrence and started to follow it throughout the multitudes of ancient scriptures. They found a story that originated in a small town called Buin. It appeared to be a children's story used to keep their kids from misbehaving. However, upon further inspection, they realized there was more to the story. It was about the Atabau Emu, which roughly translates to the impure cats. Cats were highly worshipped in ancient Egypt, but in this story, the impure cats were depicted as monsters. In the myth, the impure cats were massive, almost the size of a horse. These creatures were also nocturnal, so they would only come out at night. What was most intimidating about them was, if a child disobeyed any rule or law, these cats would come and steal them away. Most children of the village found this story scary, and soon the story of the impure cat spread all across Egypt. For a long time, many children were very obedient, but after time had passed, they began to lose belief in the story. There had never been any evidence that the impure cats were real, so they eventually decided that the story must have been made up. However, at this time, children began to go missing. This made the Egyptians wonder if the stories of the impure cats were really true. The population in Egypt slowly began to dwindle. Many even refused to go out at night. Years later, when the Romans began to successfully take over, they found it fairly easy. They noticed the fear the Egyptians had of nighttime, and they used that towards their advantage. Now, this could merely be a coincidence. There was indeed a war going on, which could be reason enough for the missing children, but another possibility, in my opinion, could have been an example of the tulpa. Tulpas are creatures that can be created when groups of people think collectively of it. The traits that a tulpa takes on, such as its physical form, is dependent on what the mass majority of people believe it to be. So in this case, these cats very well could have just started out as a story, but as the Egyptians' belief of it grew, these impure cats may have manifested into real sentient creatures. Historians later found a few ancient Roman artifacts, found to have drawings of their own armies fighting off giant-sized cats. People theorized that the Romans must have killed all the impure cats while they were conquering Egypt, and that's why there is no record of these cats existing at any other point in time. If these cats were indeed tulpas, just by me telling you this story, these cats could be reborn. So, I beg of you, do not tell this story to anyone you know. Let it die here. That was our last story of the night. Thanks everyone for tuning in to Moonlight Legends. I have been your host, Damian Knoll. Have a good night.